Yeah, I'm going to be talking about the last 4 years of work that we've completed, which was the biomedical sweep of BCS70 when participants were entering middle-aged. And I'm going to particularly focus on what we did with the activity monitors. But before I start, I just want to acknowledge that this is a massive team effort. So there was a huge amount of work that went into this, and Matt and Lisa in the audience, they'll probably remember some of the really difficult decisions that we had along the 4 years, particularly over this activity monitor. I'm sure Matt's sort of had a few sleepless nights over this as well. Also, Natalie spent most of her summer from Loughborough crunching through these data during her evenings and weekends. So again, yeah, thanks to Natalie. Physical activity researchers have become very excited about wearable technology over the last sort of decade or so. We've seen these measures creep into very large cohort studies. For example, UK Biobank have managed to get wrist-worn data in around about 100,000 of their participants. So why have we become so excited? Well, you know, as David alluded to, we've started to become sort of nervous about the sorts of biases that are possibly evident in self-reports. I think when physical activity epidemiologists originally developed their physical activity questionnaires, they were designed to capture structured exercise and sport. And actually, people are quite good at recalling very highly structured activities, but when we run into trying to capture non-structured activities of daily living with a simple questionnaire, people start to struggle a bit more. And actually, it turns out that if you look at the general population, relatively few adults are actually taking part in highly structured sport and exercise. So it's only the sort of crazy people that go and, you know, run marathons, unfortunately. So the objective devices are better at sort of capturing these patterns of non-structured incidental movement, which actually most of the population, that's how they really do accrue their activity. So which device do you use? This is a can of worms, anyone that's sort of remotely in this field. Over the past, I've probably been working in this field for about 15 years, and I've seen how things have slowly developed, the technology has developed. We started with this waist-worn device that was called an actigraph at the bottom, and that pretty much cornered the market for a certain period of time. As the technology got better, we moved to a whole manner of different body positions. So I mentioned the wrist-worn device. You can also wear the device on your chest, on the thigh, on the lower back. You can wear multiple devices. It depends how adventurous you want to be. But in essence, each of these body positions has pros and cons, both scientifically and in terms of feasibility. So I think in terms of if you're going into an established cohort with one of these devices, compliance and comfort is extremely important. We were concerned with BCS70. We certainly didn't want to irritate anyone. We wanted them to remain in the study for as long as possible. And also nowadays the wear protocols are moving towards 24-hour wear protocols. So again, you know, and you're asking people to wear these for a week, 7 to 8 days. So you want the device to be comfortable. And ideally, you don't want them to take it off, and I'm just going to talk about that now. So we opted to use this device called the ActivPAL. It's about the size of a 50p piece. It attaches to the thigh, the mid-thigh, and the main reason we went for this device was because we wanted the novel sort of question that we wanted to address was measuring sedentary behaviour, and currently most experts agree in the field that this thigh-worn position is probably going to give you the best estimate of sedentary behaviour, because what it's actually doing, it's a postural allocation device, and it's in essence telling you what angle your thigh is at. So we waterproofed this. We firstly trained our nurses how to use this device, so how to activate it, how to charge it. The waterproofing of this device was quite elaborate, and I'm not going to go into that today. So nurses went into the homes, they got consent, they attached the device, and we then asked participants to wear that for 7 days without taking it off. And that's important because previous wear protocols with for example, the waist-worn device we've had this issue of, we know participants take it off because it sometimes looks stupid if you're going out, or you might want to have a bath or a shower, so you take it off. And the problem in the past has been differentiating non-wear time from times where the participant could have been sort of sitting very still. It's still a challenge. So this protocol where we ask participants not to remove the device is quite important. Devices were then returned in the post, because obviously we didn't have the funding to send our nurses back into the homes to collect the devices. And we then processed the data using a freely available software, which I'm not going to talk too much about today, but the key part of that software is differentiating waking hours from time in bed. Not necessarily sleep, but time you are in bed. So that's the key part of this software. So now these are, I should stress that these are not final numbers. Just looking at Matt here because we still have a few teething troubles. But this is roughly what we've got, give or take 100, 80, 100 or so people. So we approached just under 7,000 of the cohort. Most of them consented to wearing the device. And unfortunately, we then lost, we were unable to use just over 800 of these devices. And the main reason was due to lost in post. Now, I don't think that necessarily means that the Royal Mail are not doing their job very well. I think it probably means that some people probably forgot to put the device back in the post, possibly, speculating. So what we've ended up with is just over 5,000 devices that we were able to extract data from, and actually met our minimum wear criteria, which was 10 hours. So they had to have worn the device for 10 continuous hours to get into our wear criteria, which is a fairly standard wear criteria. But as I'm going to show you in a minute, actually the wear was extremely good. So this is just looking at some differences, some basic demographic differences between the people that consented to wear the device compared to those that did not consent. And there's nothing really very surprising here. So in general, the people that consented were probably a bit more healthy. They were a bit more likely to be degree educated, and had slightly lower levels of obesity. These are some reasons why people refuse to wear the device. The top answer, inconvenient, so probably just didn't fancy it. And then there's a range of other. So I think the important thing about this slide, which concerned us as a team, is that people would have concerns about attaching the device to the skin and any reactions it may have to the skin. And actually, relatively few people raised that concern with us. So for me, that was quite good to see that. In essence, around about 80% of people that agreed to wear the device actually wore the device for 6 or more days, which is really fantastic. And this is just a comparison of characteristics of people that were better at wearing the device for longer compared to those that wore it for less than 3 days. So the people that were good, good compliance to wearing the device, again, similar to the previous slide, they were probably more likely to be degree educated. They were generally presented with a healthier profile. The most interesting thing for me about this slide is the seasonal effect. So people that receive the device in the winter and spring were more likely to wear it for the full week compared to if they had it in the summer and autumn. And that kind of corroborates some of the reports we had back. So during some of the particularly warm periods whilst the study was going on, we did have some problems with the device slipping off. Obviously, particularly with men sweating a bit more in the summer, I think that's probably what was happening. So this is just a summary of the data, the actual data now, that the device, the interesting bit, this is what we're left with. So this data is just split into men and women, but actually it's almost identical between men and women. So the total awake wearing time is about 16 hours, which makes sense. So that would, if you do the maths, that gives you about 8 hours. Suggests that they're in bed for about 8 hours on average. As I said, average wear days was about 6 days, which was excellent. So sitting time, the device recorded on average about 9 hours of sitting a day. And of those 9 hours, around about 2.5 hours was in prolonged bouts of 60 minutes. So this is where someone is sitting down for 60 minutes without getting up. The device also pulls out, then differentiates standing time from actual activity or movement. So you can see, on average, people were recording about 2 hours of activity. And out of those 2 hours, around about 50 minutes met the threshold for moderate to vigorous intensity. This is a little bit contentious. This is probably the only sort of contentious part of the analysis. So we made a decision about the cut point we would use to derive MVPA based on step cadence. And this is a comparison of wear compared to previous studies that have used this device across the world. You can see that our study, in comparison with the others, is absolutely massive. So the biggest study before we attempted this was N=782, which was OzDiab in Australia. But you can see our wear compliance stacks up quite well with the smaller studies. The real outlier here is USP, which is a Scottish study, and the reason they had 90% compliance, the reason I think for that is that they got researchers to go back into households and actually collect the device. And I think that has definitely some impact on people's sort of compliance to wear, etc. So this is just how, this is just looking at some descriptors in terms of tertiles of objective sitting time. So these are not adjusted in any way. They're basic descriptives. So we've got sitting time broken into the 3 groups. So it's around about less than 8 hours a day, 8 to 10, and more than 10. And you can see the people that sit more, there's a trend for greater smoking in the high sitters. Interestingly, people that sit more has a trend for more likely to be degree educated, and I'll explain that in the next slide. But there's also interesting correlations between sitting more and diabetes and hypertension, which is consistent with the existing literature. And obviously this is something that we'll need to tease apart in much more detail when we start to properly model the data. So we also looked at how the objective data stacks up against the self-reports. And this is, again, quite a preliminary look at this. We're simply looking at trends here. But you can see that people that report what we would consider to be high daily TV viewing are more likely to be in this, the highest tertile of objectively measured sitting, which is encouraging. But the biggest thing here that seems to be driving it is whether they report a sitting occupation. So nearly 76% of those in the highest sitting tertile are actually reporting a sitting occupation. So, you know, clearly that's driving a lot of this, and that then ties in with the correlation with being degree educated, because clearly people that have got degrees are probably more likely to be going into sitting occupations, sort of managerial type occupations. I think that's it. Yeah. I'll be happy to take your questions.